Greetings YouTube, Skill Incarnate bringing you all the latest indie gaming goodness. It's time for another edition of my Project Zomboid tutorial series, where I help new players to the game, alongside players returning to the new build of Project Zomboid. I've gathered some more tips and tricks from my time playing the game, to make your own survival efforts easier. Today's subject will be farming, which is absolutely essential to providing a renewable source of food after the power goes out. Any survivor can plant a farm, but managing crops, avoiding disease, and knowing the different crop types will give you a massive advantage over other survivors. So grab your trowel, grab your seeds, grab your watering can, and listen close to a man who has zero experience in real life farming as I teach you to do it right in a video game. Tip number 1. Gather farming supplies. When out on your scavenging runs, you should always be on the lookout for farming tools and seeds. Although food will be plentiful at least in the first months, you should always try and start at least a small farm as early as possible, before the power fails, the water shuts off and food begins to rot. Even the quickest growing crops can take over a week to grow, but different crops have a variety of applications beyond simple cooking. The items you'll need to start a farm are a trowel for tilling the ground, at least one bag of seeds to plant crops, and a container to use for watering. Ideally you want a bucket or a watering can, as these carry the most water. Also try to gather as many garbage bags from kitchen cabinets, bins and dumpsters, as you'll need these later to build rain collectors. You should also try and find an empty sack, because it can be used to relocate dirt for an indoor farm, which you will need before the winter months. Plus, they double as fertilizer sacks when used with a compost bin. Finally, you'll want a way of collecting water in the early game before you can build the rain collector. So gather up any cooking pots and saucepans to place outside your home. These will passively collect water every time it rains, and you can use this water to drink or to water your crops. With these tools you can start planning where to set up your farm. Tip number 2. Crop placement is essential. Make sure to plan the layout of your farm, including space between your crops and room for walls and structures before you begin to plant. This is important for a few reasons. The most obvious danger is the zombies themselves, because while you can safely walk over your crop, the undead will trample them in their effort to make a meal out of you, destroying your farm and forcing you to start from scratch. By spacing out your crop, you make it less likely for all of them to be destroyed by a wandering horde. The other reason is disease. When planting any crop, there's a chance for them to get a disease. All diseases will spread to neighbouring crops, meaning a poorly placed farm can be destroyed by a single diseased plant. I plan my farm by spacing out my plants, ensuring that if one is affected, it won't destroy my entire harvest. You should also plan for a wall around your farm. In the early game, a log wall is perfect. All you need to build it are 4 logs, some rip sheets, and of course you're going to need an axe, meaning you can use the axe to cut down enough logs to build a barrier to keep the zombies from tap dancing on your crop. A final note is to always keep zombie corpses away from your crop. Dead zombies and zombie blood dramatically increase the chance of disease. Zombie blood can be cleaned with bleach and a ripped sheet, and corpses should always be removed from your farming area. Tip number 3. Learn to use the different crops. There are a variety of different food you can grow using your farm, and they all have different uses. You should aim to have at least 2 or 3 different types of food growing at all times. Cabbages, for example, are the fastest growing crop, and not only do they fill you up, but they provide some water when eating them. They're a great first choice, as they provide the largest yield, but they aren't very nutritious, and they rot very fast. So they're best used up before your other crops, as either an ingredient for cooking or a trapping bait. Potatoes and broccoli, on the other hand, take a very long time to grow, but they're very filling and they don't rot for a very long time, so they're my go-to choice in the late game. The other type of crop you should use are indoor crops, which include carrots and radishes. In order to set up an indoor crop, take a trowel or shovel along with an empty sack, right-click on any dirt tile outside and select Fill Sack. Similarly, you can right-click and empty the sack indoors to create a plot for growing indoor crops. These must be grown indoors, as too much rain will kill them, so make sure to only water them roughly every 3 days. While more troublesome to grow than the outdoor crops, they are especially important, because during the winter, outdoor crops will stop growing due to the cold. Some indoor crops like carrots can also be used as trapping bait, and trapping is a vital source of food. Tip number 4. Monitor your crops for disease and wait to harvest them. As your farming skill increases over time, you will be able to identify diseases when you inspect your crop. The diseases that your crops can catch are mildew, which causes them to grow slower, insects, which cause them to require more water, and devil's water fungi, which is extremely infectious and can kill your crops. If you've found and read the farming magazine and have a gardening spray can found in warehouses or hardware stores, you can make a mildew spray by combining water and a bottle of milk, and you can make insect spray by combining some cigarettes and water. Spraying your crops with this will remove the corresponding disease. If a crop is infected with devil's water fungi, you need to immediately remove it by using the remove crop option with a trowel. This is essential because it will spread to all of your crops and potentially kill anything next to them. Finally, if you wait an additional few days to harvest your crops and confirm they have a status of seed bearing, when you inspect them, you will get some seeds back, which is essential for being able to replant future crops. You can also tell a crop is in seed bearing status when they're covered in small white spots. Tip number 5. Environmentally friendly apocalypse. Here's some advice about what to do with rotten food. As your farming skill improves, you will eventually harvest more crops than you can cook or trap with. Project Zomboid now allows you to build a composter from 5 planks and 4 nails. Plus you'll need a carpentry skill of 2. If you place your rotten food into the composter, much like real life, it will produce compost you can use later. You can capitalize on this by growing crops that return a large yield, like cabbage, and using them as compost for your indoor crops during the winter, as your outdoor crops will stop growing until the weather warms up. Right click on your composter and you can see how much compost can be collected. keep in mind it will take a long time to convert food to compost, and you'll need the composter to be at least 5% full in order to collect some. In order to collect compost, you need to right click on the composter with an empty sack in your inventory and select Collect Compost. Then you can right click on the desired crop and select Add Compost. This will speed up a crop to the next stage of growth and is best used on crops that are nearly ready to harvest, or you can use them in the winter. Another reason you should use the composter is because they have a chance of spawning worms, which are handy for fishing baits or bird traps. They can also be eaten in an emergency, and they don't go off. Tip number 6. Slippery when wet. If you've been following my advice, you should have a set of containers for gathering rain. While this helps during the wet season, you may find that you struggle to keep your crop watered during the summer. This is where rain collectors come into play. If you've been barricading and building around your base like you should be, you'll eventually build your carpentry skill level up to 4. You can then construct a water collector from 4 planks, 4 garbage bags and 4 nails. The collector will automatically collect water during the rain. A small water collector can hold 160 units of water, or 4 full buckets. When you reach carpentry level 7, you can build a large water collector, which can hold even more water. You should aim to build at least 2 water collectors in order to keep your crops alive during the drier parts of the year and provide drinking water. You can gather water from a collector by having a container in your inventory, right-clicking on the collector and selecting Fill Container. You can then use the water on your crops. Just remember that if you want to drink it, you'll need to place it in a cooking pot or kettle and boil it on a campfire or stove. A final use for collectors is that they can be used to store drinkable water if you build one indoors. You can build the collector and then add clean water by right-clicking on it with a clean water container and selecting Fill Container. Just make sure you only add clean water to the collector to make sure that it remains pure. And that was it for my farming tip video for the new build of Project Zomboid. I hope these tips help you to get your own farm up and running so you can stay fed and survive in the apocalypse. While I covered a lot of farming techniques, I'm sure you'll have further questions because this is a very complex subject. So feel free to reach out in the comments if you want to know more. I'd love to hear from you if you have your own farming advice or any other tips you'd like to share. Please give me a subscribe if you found this useful, and hopefully you'll join me next time when we cover some more Project Zomboid. Until then, Skill Incarnate, out.